Part 1. The Illusion of Loyalty, Our Inherited Sublime Lie. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. Friedrich Nietzsche. This aphorism, as precise as a surgeon's scalpel, cuts through the tender veil of our morality, pointing directly to a core truth we have meticulously avoided: loyalty. The virtue we have been taught since childhood to revere is perhaps not as unshakable in its essence as we imagine. The concept of loyalty, like a vast and invisible net, envelops every corner of our existence, permeating every fiber of our lives. It echoes in the hushed vows of lovers, in the ironclad contracts between business partners, in the impassioned declarations of allegiance on the political stage, and in the unspoken bonds of duty passed down through generations of family. We are told, time and again, that loyalty is the litmus test of character, the dividing line between the noble and the base, the very bedrock upon which human society rests. It has been woven into poems, celebrated in epics, sculpted into the pedestals of heroes, becoming the ultimate measure of an individual's worth. We crave the loyalty of others to feel secure and to belong. We strive to display our own loyalty, to prove our reliability and virtue. Society uses it to build order, religion to unite believers, and families to sustain affection. It is a moral hard currency, a supreme virtue we deeply believe in and spend our lives practicing and pursuing. But what if all of this entire magnificent, solemn, and comforting system of belief is merely built upon a foundation of dangerous quicksand? What if it is nothing more than an elaborately constructed, generationally inherited grand misconception, a splendid veil used to conceal the deeper, more primitive drives of human nature? Here, we must bravely confront a giant of thought, a Florentine philosopher who, for 5 centuries, has been misunderstood and demonized, yet who precisely for that reason possesses the power to pierce the deepest darkness of the human condition: Niccolò Machiavelli. He was not merely a cold-hearted tutor of princely power, but a ruthless realist, an anatomist who dared to tear away all sentimental masks and gaze directly at the true operational mechanics of human relationships. In his world, many of the virtues we cherish are but the disguises of expediency. Machiavelli, the 16th century political philosopher, his name still synonymous with political cunning and cold realism, exposed a brutal truth with an almost cruel honestia truth that countless people, out of fear or naivety, still refuse to acknowledge. This truth is, loyalty, as we understand it, is essentially a lie. This does not mean that loyalty is occasionally compromised or difficult to maintain in trying times. No, Machiavelli's insight is far more subversive. He posits that loyalty, fundamentally and in its inherent structure, is a deception we tell ourselves and others. It is a grand collective performance in which we are both actors and audience, immersed in a drama directed by mutual necessity, yet oblivious to the true motivations behind the curtain. This is not a distant historical speculation, but a daily reality we all enact. Look around you. The evidence is everywhere, easy to find. Your business partner, who calls you a brother, is his loyalty only indestructible when profits flow like a tide? Once the tide of fortune recedes, exposing the barren sand, does that loyalty evaporate with it? The politician on the podium, swearing to serve the people, are his principles sacred only when the polling curves are in his favor? When the wind changes, does he not discard them faster than turning a page? The friend who toasts with you in your moments of triumph when you face hardship and your social capital diminishes, does not his shadow vanish like a phantom into the crowd? Even the family ties, hailed as the most unbreakable of bonds under the pressure of immense gain or life and death situations, do they not also twist, deform, and sometimes snap? History and reality provide an endless stream of footnotes to Machiavelli's thesis. From the assassination of Julius Caesar by his most trusted Brutus to the founders of modern business empires turning on each other over profit distribution. From the naked declaration in international relations that there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests, to the mundane betrayals of friendship over trivial gains in our own lives. The evidence surrounds us, as ubiquitous as the air we breathe. Yet, we cling desperately, stubbornly, to the myth of loyalty. Why do we do this? because the alternative to acknowledge this is simply too unsettling. It would force us to confront a chilling, uncomfortable reality about human nature, a truth about ourselves and the world we live in that we would rather ignore. Machiavelli's thought, like an X-ray, penetrated the flesh of Renaissance politics to reveal its skeleton of power. His work does not merely describe how people behaved in 16th century Florence. With a timeless insight, it reveals the underlying operational mechanics of all human interaction, across all eras and all places. It reveals the source code of human behavior. And these insights will completely overturn everything you have been taught about loyalty, obligation, and human connection. Are you ready? Let us follow in Machiavelli's footsteps, into this territory forbidden to idealists, to explore the truth of loyalty. Part 2. The currency of power, self, interest, fear, and the transactional nature of loyalty. The core of Machiavelli's thought is most powerfully articulated in his infamous yet monumentally important work, The Prince. Written in 1513, this book is far from being a mere evil handbook tailored for tyrants, as many misunderstand it to be. On the contrary, it is a masterpiece of realism, a cold, unflinching, and morally impartial analysis of human nature and power dynamics. The profundity of this book lies in the fact that its conclusions are not born of abstract speculation, but are grounded in Machiavelli's direct observations and first-hand, often bloody, experiences as a diplomat and statesman in the Florentine government. To understand Machiavelli's view on loyalty, we must first grasp his fundamental judgment of human nature. He wrote, "For of men it may generally be affirmed that they are thankless, fickle, hypocritical, cowardly, and greedy of gain." This statement forms the bedrock of his entire theoretical edifice. In his view, humans are not inherently moral beings, but are animals driven by two of the most primitive and powerful forces, desire and fear. Therefore, any relationship built upon the ethereal foundations of moral platitudes is destined to be fragile. From this, he derives a crucial corollary. Loyalty is not a product of noble sentiment or steadfast moral belief, but a naked transaction. It is a commodity that can be bought, appraised, and weighed. The currency of this transaction is self-interest. People choose to be loyal not because it is in their nature, but because in a given context, the benefits of loyalty, or the damages avoided, outweigh the benefits of betrayal. Machiavelli further dissects this transaction into two primary forms, giving rise to his famous discourse on loyalty maintained by love versus loyalty maintained by fear. It is a safer thing to be feared than loved, he argues. For love is a bond of obligation which men, being base, break when it is to their advantage to do so. But fear is a bond of affliction which is never broken. The insight here is staggering. Loyalty based on love or gratitude is inherently dependent on a continuous supply of benefits and emotional fulfillment. It is beautiful and warm, but also extremely unstable. The moment the chain of benefits is broken, or a more profitable alternative appears, this form of loyalty rapidly dissolves. Loyalty based on fear, however, is far more stable. Fear here does not just mean the threat of violence. It encompasses a broader spectrum of negative consequences, the fear of losing status, wealth, or reputation, the fear of legal sanction or social condemnation. The dread of punishment is a more enduring and reliable restraint. This framework perfectly explains the phenomena we observed in Part 1. The loyalty of business partners is built on the interest of mutual profit. The loyalty of politicians is built on the interest of votes and power. The loyalty of friends is built on the interest of emotional support and social value. The moment the scales of these interests tip, the weight of loyalty shifts with them. When the Medici family fell from power in Florence, their once devoted supporters almost overnight pledged allegiance to the new republic. And when the Medici returned to power, these very same people, without a moment's hesitation, turned their coats once more and groveled at their feet. This is not a moral anomaly or an accident. For Machiavelli, it is the normal expression of human law. It is a continuous, dynamic assessment of costs and benefits. This leads to another core dimension of loyalty, its performative nature. Machiavelli keenly observed that in human society, appearing to be is far more important than actually being. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." We live on a grand stage, and loyalty is often a posture that requires careful rehearsal and performance. Swearing-in ceremonies, loyalty medals, the recurring theme of "we are a family" in corporate culture, all of these serve to reinforce the appearance of loyalty. People perform loyalty to gain trust and opportunity, while those in power acknowledge this performance to maintain control and order. This vast chasm between appearance and reality is the psychological foundation upon which the myth of loyalty is sustained. Our minds are naturally inclined to believe what we see because it is far easier than feeling and verifying the unseen heart. We prefer to trust public promises and solemn rituals because they provide us with psychological certainty and comfort. We yearn to live in a predictable, orderly world, and the concept of loyalty offers us precisely this beautiful illusion. Therefore, when we are betrayed, the intense pain we feel stems not just from the practical loss, but from the shattering of our worldview. It is like a broken mirror, reflecting the cold, transactional nature of relationships that we were unwilling to admit. The pain we feel is not just emotional injury, but the collapse of a belief. The intensity of this reaction is often disproportionate to the actual damage. It points more to the psychological threat this act poses to our constructed understanding of what relationships are supposed to be. Machiavelli's genius lies not in advocating for perfidy, but in soberly revealing a fact. The stability of relationships and social structures depends more on a precise, dynamic equilibrium of interests than on illusory moral promises. Loyalty is merely the outward appearance of this system when it is in balance. It is not the engine that turns the gears, but merely the pleasant hum they make when running smoothly. Only by understanding this can we truly begin to comprehend the game of power and our real position within it. Part 3. The Realist's Navigation. Surviving in a world without absolute loyalty. If we accept Machiavelli's unsettling perspective that loyalty is a conditional product of self-interest and fear, rather than an absolute moral precept, then how are we to navigate such a world? Does this mean we must abandon all trust, descend into complete cynicism, and treat every human interaction as a zero-sum game? The answer is no. Machiavelli himself was not advocating for a society of perpetual suspicion and conflict. His philosophy, when properly understood, is not a dark tunnel leading to despair, but a realist map for safely navigating the turbulent seas of human nature. It offers a form of liberation and wisdom that frees us from unrealistic illusions and the inevitable disappointment that follows. First, Machiavelli's thought teaches us to shift our analytical focus from the ethereal concept of character to the tangible reality of interests. When evaluating any relationship, be it a personal friendship, a business partnership, or a political alliance, it is far more effective to clearly analyze the mutual interests that sustain it and the potential points of conflict than it is to speculate on the other party's moral nobility. He famously stated, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." The deeper meaning here is that a wise leader will surround himself with individuals whose personal interests are highly aligned with the overall interests of the ruler or the organization. The bond of interest is far more reliable than a verbal pledge of allegiance. This interest analysis can be applied to every facet of our lives. In professional relationships, it means recognizing that while a positive corporate culture and a sense of belonging are important, the core drivers of employee loyalty remain compensation, opportunities for advancement, skill development, and job security. A shrewd manager doesn't rely on team-building exercises and slogans alone, but designs a clear and fair system of incentives and rewards that tightly links an employee's personal growth to the company's success. Similarly, as an employee, rather than blindly trusting that the company will always take care of you, it is wiser to continuously enhance your own value, ensuring your interests align with the company's needs, while also keeping an eye on external market opportunities. This is loyalty based on rational judgment, not wishful thinking. In personal relationships, the same principle holds true. A long-lasting and healthy relationship, whether friendship or romance, necessarily involves a profound exchange of mutual value. This value can be emotional comfort, intellectual stimulation, practical support, or even the sharing of social resources. Acknowledging this is not a profanation of emotion, but a deeper respect for it. It helps us understand that relationships require continuous effort and investment to ensure that both parties feel fulfilled and are growing. Relationships that rely solely on initial passion or a moral promise, while neglecting the long-term exchange of value, are often the ones most susceptible to erosion over time. In the realm of politics and international relations, Machiavelli's ideas are, of course, canonical. Alliances and rivalries between nations are almost entirely structured around national interests. Sworn enemies can become allies in the face of a common threat, and once close partners can turn hostile over a divergence of interests. International treaties and military alliances, which appear to be manifestations of loyalty, are underpinned by meticulous calculations of cost, benefit, and risk. They are effective not because of friendship between nations, but because the cost of violating the treaty, be it economic sanctions, military retaliation, or international isolation, is far greater than the benefit of adhering to it. Second, Machiavellian realism equips us with a powerful defense mechanism. When we no longer harbor naive fantasies about absolute loyalty, we are far less likely to be crushed by the betrayal of others. We come to see betrayal as a predictable risk, a normal human response under certain conditions, rather than as an incomprehensible moral failing. This shift in mindset allows us to quickly detach from the emotional vortex of a setback and move toward rational analysis and response. We stop asking, "How could they do this to me?" and start asking, "What change in the balance of interests caused this to happen?" and "How can I adjust my strategy to minimize my losses?" This does not encourage us to become cold and heartless. It encourages us to become more resilient and pragmatic. Like an experienced sailor who knows the sea is capricious and never expects perpetual calm, he learns to read the skies, master his craft, reinforce his vessel, and prepare for any storm. He still loves the sea, but his love is built on a profound understanding and respect, not on blind illusion. Finally, this clear-eyed perspective helps us build more stable and resilient relationships. Once we understand the conditional nature of loyalty, we will proactively work to construct and maintain the conditions that foster it. We will cherish partners whose interests are highly aligned with our own and strive to ensure that alignment endures. We will place greater emphasis on establishing clear rules and contracts, increasing the cost of betrayal to enhance the stability of the relationship. We will communicate our needs and expectations more honestly, building our connections on a foundation of transparency and mutual benefit. Ironically, a realist who deeply understands Machiavelli's thought will often behave in a manner that appears more loyal than a naive idealist. This is because his commitments are based on a deep insight into human nature and a rational calculation of value, not on fleeting emotions. He understands both the value of keeping his promises and the cost of breaking them. The idealist, on the other hand, whose loyalty is a castle in the sky, will see it crumble at the first gust of reality, leaving both himself and those who trusted him in ruins. Therefore, what Machiavelli offers is not a cynical manual for survival, but a higher form of wisdom. It demands that we abandon our childish innocence and adopt an adult's perspective to understand the true operational logic of this complex world. It is a liberation of thought that may be painful at first, but ultimately leads to true maturity and strength. Part 4. The Paradox of Liberation, Embracing Reality, Remodeling Trust. Upon first encountering Machiavelli's perspective on loyalty, one is likely to feel a chilling coldness, even a sense of moral offense. His theories seem to strip human relationships of all warmth, poetry, and sanctity, reducing them to a cold, stark calculation of interests. They challenge nearly all our cherished notions of love, friendship, and devotion. The world he depicts seems a depressing place, rife with suspicion and machination. However, if we can bravely push past this initial psychological discomfort, we discover that on this seemingly barren landscape of realism, a more profound and potent form of liberation actually grows. This is the ultimate paradox of Machiavellian thought. It is precisely by abandoning the obsession with absolute loyalty that we gain the capacity to build connections that are truly meaningful and resilient. This liberation manifests on multiple levels. First, it frees us from a victim mentality. One who staunchly believes in unconditional loyalty will feel their world collapse when betrayed, casting themselves as an innocent casualty and wallowing in resentment and self-pity. In contrast, a Machiavellian realist views every betrayal as a valuable learning opportunity, a test of their own judgment and assessment of the situation. They will reflect, did I overestimate the strength of our mutual interests or underestimate the temptations the other party faced? Did I fail to establish effective mechanisms of restraint, or was I too slow to react to changing circumstances? This introspective attribution of cause restores agency, transforming us from passive sufferers into active strategists. Second, it liberates us from unrealistic moral expectations of others. We no longer demand that our friends, partners, colleagues, or nations be moral saints. We cease to judge them by an impossible standard of absolute virtue. We understand that they, like us, are complex individuals making decisions driven by their own interests, fears, and limited rationality. This understanding fosters a profound sense of tolerance. We realize that the actions of others, for better or worse, are seldom about us personally, but are the results of their own responses to their own environments and pressures. This depersonalized perspective can dramatically dissipate the anger and pain of interpersonal conflicts, allowing us to handle disagreements more objectively and peacefully. More importantly, Machiavelli's clear-eyed view provides us with a more proactive guide to action. It teaches us that instead of wasting time and energy pursuing an illusory promise of loyalty, we should focus on creating and maintaining mutual interests. The most effective way to earn the loyalty of others is not to demand a pledge, but to make it clear to them that staying aligned with you is their most advantageous choice. This means that in any relationship, we must constantly ask ourselves, what unique value can I provide? What are our common goals? How can we more tightly intertwine our fates? This shift in thinking, from demanding loyalty to creating value, is the very transformation from a passive idealist to an active realist. It turns our relationships from fragile, emotional porcelain, which must be handled with extreme care, into a precision machine that can be designed and reinforced through wisdom and effort. Within this machinery, trust does not disappear. It is redefined. Machiavellian trust is not a blind faith in another's moral perfection, but a confidence in their rational self-interest. I trust you, not because I believe you will never betray me, but because I have, through my own efforts, created a situation where not betraying me is more advantageous to you than betraying me. This is a more mature and reliable form of trust. Thus, we arrive at a deeply ironic conclusion. The person most likely to betray you is often not the Machiavellian schemer who reveals their selfish nature from the start, but rather the naive idealist who sincerely believes in absolute loyalty. Because their belief is so brittle, a single, slight collision with reality can shatter their entire worldview. When they discover the world is not as pure as they imagined, their disillusionment often drives them to the opposite extreme: complete cynicism and unbridled betrayal. The person who recognizes the conditional nature of loyalty from the outset, however, is paradoxically more capable of maintaining a stable relationship. Their actions are not dictated by volatile emotions, but are supported by a clear, rational framework of assessed interests. Ultimately, Machiavelli's insight does not aim to destroy our faith in human connection, but to place it on a more solid foundation. True loyalty is not an absolute moral commitment, but a dynamic equilibrium maintained through aligned interests and meaningful consequences in a constantly changing world. Understanding this does not diminish its value. On the contrary, it empowers us to nurture and sustain it more effectively. The next time someone pledges their undying loyalty to you, whether in politics, business, friendship, or love, remember Machiavelli's clear-eyed assessment. Look beyond the performance to the underlying calculations. Consider what might change those calculations and prepare accordingly. This is not because you expect betrayal, but because you understand the true nature of human connection. In a world where loyalty is conditional, the true distinction lies not between the loyal and the disloyal, but between those who understand the mechanism of loyalty and those who do not. This understanding does not guarantee that relationships will last, but it dramatically improves your ability to navigate their complex and ever-shifting reality. And that, perhaps, is the most valuable, most challenging, and most liberating legacy that Machiavelli has left us.